Aloha, guys. We're going to go over Brandon Lehman. Got a couple videos of his today. We've gone over a video or two of his before. This is a Native Land podcast that he's going over. Angela Rye, professional wrong person, Angela Rye, always crashing out. Andrew Gillum, and I'm not sure their co-host name offhand, but we're going to go over him talking about them, a little bit about democracy and the Electoral College.
I'm not really interested in upholding the white man's democracy as much anymore.
Imagination's a privilege.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Imagination is a privilege.
Yeah.
Privilege.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. I'm always trying to convince, even I can be dead wrong, and I'm still going to try to convince you to my position till I figure out I'm wrong and be like, my bad.
Right.
But
On today's episode of Woke Liberals Are the Most Delusional People on Planet Earth, we have this podcast full of race hustlers coming to the conclusion that having an imagination...
And they all call each other race hustlers. It's so crazy. They all say the same thing about each other, the Democrats and Republicans. They're just, it's so funny. Like, he doesn't. The other guy calls himself the black conservative, right? He's a huge race hustler. I don't think this guy's a race hustler as much, but, I mean, the more you bring up race, the more you're hustling, right? So, but it's just so funny how
is
they
white
all
privilege.
do the same thing.
It just blows my mind the hoops and bounds that liberals will jump through to try to make themselves into victims. Now, just to give you a sense of the tone and low IQ takes that we're going to hear from these people, listen to one of the hosts talk about how she doesn't like the white man's democracy and doesn't want to uphold it anymore. Watch.
You said there's always space for our work and not space for our needs. And I think that is kind of where I am right now. I'm not really interested in upholding the white man's democracy as much anymore. But I am interested in protecting my people.
Now, let's see what she means by that. First, are we even a democracy?
Myth number one, we are not a democracy. A democracy inherently means the centralization of power. A constitutional republic respects the decentralization of powers. The founding fathers wrote in the Federalist Papers that the Electoral College will be the greatest hedge against the tyranny of the mob.
Okay, so we are not a democracy. We are electoral representatives, or a representative republic. Man, I can't speak right now. But okay, so we're going to find out a little bit about the Electoral College.
Latif.
Annie.
Radio Lab. Okay, before we get going, I'm curious, what do you as a Canadian here on a visa, what do you know about the Electoral College?
Okay, well, I guess when I first got here, I thought this is probably a school you go to when you want to become president.
It's a college. It is.
Yeah.
That was
Ivy
my
League,
first
probably.
question about it. Why is it called college? But you know what it is? It's like, so the use of the word college here, this is a total tangent. It's college, like, you know how they have like the College of Cardinals or the College of Surgeons or whatever. It's like college is just like, the meaning is just a group of people.
Oh, like a pod of whales.
It's like a pod of whales. Yes, exactly. Okay, so we left off. Birch Bai is now focusing his problem-solving gaze on the Electoral College. He's having these committee hearings, and he's learning, right, why it exists, what it does, how it works. And so I think for us to be able to understand why all of this radicalizes him, we have to learn what he learned. We have to go back and understand the Electoral College.
Okay, let's
So let's go. Let's go all the way to the beginning to explain.
I thought we had started, but it sounds like we haven't even started yet.
No, we haven't
Exciting.
even started.
Amazing.
It's so wonky, but
Let's
we're
start.
ready. You have me. I'm your candy man.
I'll follow you anywhere.
Okay. All right. So here we go.
So this is Radio Lab from NPR. Radio Lab is a really cool show or whatever. They got all this music and they jump around. So if you like the story here, go check out Radio Lab on NPR. They got plenty of stories for years and years and years.
So here we are in the candy land that is Philadelphia, 1787, the Constitutional Convention. And founding fathers are like, we're starting this new country, we're very excited about it. The thing we can all agree on is we do not want a king. But we do kind of need someone to be in charge, so we're gonna have this person called the president.
But how are we going to choose the president?
That would require some thought.
Can I pause and take a little sip of Coke here?
Yeah, of course. Go for it. By the way, this is Alex Kesar. Also, I should say, even in our first conversation, when I was talking to Jill,
So there's a great book by Alex Kesar called Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College?
she brought you up. And then basically every other interview we've done for this story, people have brought you up.
That's what I tried to do in that book.
So he wrote the book, Why Do We Still Have the Electoral College? And he's also a professor of history.
And social policy at Harvard University.
But, okay.
So anyway, they couldn't agree on a method of choosing the president.
And so there are some ideas on the table.
One idea was, well, we just came up with Congress.
All right, well, Congress should just elect the president.
But that's a bad idea. Then you lose separation of powers and checks and balances.
Then the president would be answerable to Congress. Like, what if he runs for re-election? He needs to have their favor. That's stupid. We can't do that. That's a dumb idea. Thanks very much.
So someone else in the room says, well,
What about the people? And everyone's like, no, can't do that.
Look, how is Farmer Johnson in a distant county
gonna know about some guy in Virginia running for president?
It's 1787. People didn't know anybody beyond their own neighborhood or town.
So what they decided to do
was to take a break for a week.
They just left Philadelphia.
George Washington went fishing for the week.
What?
And they left behind a committee called, and you'll like this, it was called the Committee on Unfinished Parts.
I kind of love that.
Right? Okay, so these founders, most of whom you never heard of, weeks later, they are still stuck there in Philadelphia.
All the cool guys are fishing.
All the cool guys are out fishing and doing other stuff, and they have to figure this out.
To get this thing done, they wanted to get it sent to the states.
So they're like, okay, how do we do this? How do we pick a president? How do we do this? And then they figured it out. They were like, okay, how about we just copy-paste Congress?
What does that mean?
Well,
How do you copy paste?
Right.
Like just plagiarize?
No, they're not going to plagiarize.
Okay.
They're just like, okay, we know everybody's already agreed on Congress, right? There's been a lot of debate, a lot of arguing, but what they did to make a government that everybody agreed on, to make Congress, is they started putting thumbs on scales for different groups of people.
Thumb on a scale. Go over it.
Okay, so one of the thumbs is they make the Senate. And they say every state, doesn't matter if you're big or small, you get 2 senators. And so that's a little thumb on the scale for the small states that don't have a lot of people in them, so that they aren't completely overrun by the big states.
Okay.
The other thumb is for the South. They say, okay, you can count an enslaved person in your state as 3/5 of a person. That way you boost the population of your state and you get more representatives in the House. That was another thumb, to give more power to the South so they weren't overrun by the North.
You can imagine them sitting there, okay, so how do we choose a president? Well, do big states have more influence than small states? And, what about slaves? And then we're going to reopen that whole thing? No, we're going to import the whole thing. So what the Electoral College is in some respects a replica of Congress. If you think about it, each state has electors equal to the number of representatives plus the number of senators, okay? And then the electors would convene in their state capitals and cast their electoral votes.
And so the committee's like, bingo, job done.
So that sort of seems smart to me.
It is, under the circumstances, very clever solution.
Yeah.
So that all is stuff they put in the Constitution, right? So it's like, there's this body of electors that vote for the president. Each state has a certain number of electors based on how many representatives they have in Congress. All of that is in the Constitution. What is not in the Constitution is how to convert the people's votes in the state into electoral votes. Do you do it proportionally?
Where if you get 53% of the state's vote,
you get 53% of the electoral vote.
Right.
That seems more fair, wouldn't it?
Or you could do it by district. Each district in a state gets an electoral vote. But ultimately, the founders are like, we're going to let the states decide.
That makes sense. That's like an important part of this country is that the states
That
are
is an important part of
making
this
big
country,
decisions.
yeah.
So
True. But that might be the biggest mistake they made in this whole process.
So basically...
And Alex says there is this pivotal moment pretty early on where the system we now have starts to really take shape.
In the 1800 election,
between these two sort of juggernauts in the history of this country, Adams and Jefferson.
Now, they have also run against each other in 1796.
And in that election, which Adams won,
Adams had gotten an electoral vote from the state of Virginia, Jefferson's state.
Because Virginia was doing district voting. Adams had won a district, so we got a vote.
But in 1800, the Virginia legislature didn't want that to happen again. They saw a close election coming.
And so, the Virginia politicians got together and passed a state law that said, okay, we're done with this district system. From now on, the way our electors will vote will be
winner take all.
If you win the majority of the votes in this state, all of our electors will cast their votes for you. And the Virginia...
And of all three of the ways that they said, like getting the percent of the whole state, or going by district, or getting all the state just because you got 50%, they picked the worst one. Like, why would, that's the least democratic way to do it.
Virginian politicians, they did this because they knew Jefferson was going to win a majority of votes in their state, and this way he wouldn't leave any on the table.
It's a little dirty.
A little dirty.
I don't know, something's a little smelly.
Yeah, the candy's gone smelly. Yeah. Because what they're doing is erasing all of the votes of the people who voted for Adams.
Yeah,
right.
No, exactly. And what's interesting when you look into the documents of it is they passed that law and then they attached to it a kind of apology for doing it.
Effectively saying,
we know this isn't really good or fair.
We know it would be better for the country if we did not do this.
Dang.
But we're doing it anyway.
So if Virginia did this, shockingly, Massachusetts, John Adams' state, retaliated and did a version of the same thing.
And Alex says, after that, the states...
they're off to the races.
Another state does it, then another state does it. And this is basically what the...
And so the states competed to the bottom of the democratic process, right? Just because you compete and just because you leave it to the state rather than the government or the federal government, that's not going to make things turn out right. It's like that they picked the least democratic way. They wanted to shun the people, or not necessarily shun, but just cut their voice out, the people that don't totally agree with them. That is not democracy. That is not the melting pot we are supposed to be. Ideas. We're supposed to have a diversity of ideas.
The system is now. And what that system leads to is the feeling that your vote just doesn't actually matter.
And in many states, it does not.
Because, like, if you vote for someone for president and then 50% plus one people in your state vote for someone else,
your vote don't
your
count
vote
at all.
doesn't get counted. Like, it for president, it means it
Thrown out.
It's effectively thrown out. And that is essentially happening to tens of millions of votes every presidential election.
So we should have it the other way, where you either do it by district or percentage of the vote in the whole state, then you get a percentage of the electoral college. But we also need ranked choice voting, so you can feel free to vote for who you really want to vote for.
Right. Are you going to make us feel better about voting by the end of this? Or...
I think so.
It is with pleasure that I introduce Senator Birch Bayh.
Because I kind of think of Birch and what he was trying to do as a sort of beacon of hope.
Thank you very much, Mark. Members of the faculty and student body of UCLA, it's a privilege for me to have the chance to be here with you this afternoon.
Okay, so that's a little bit on what she's talking about. She doesn't want the white man or be a part of the white man's democracy anymore, right? So it's not a true democracy. And it's not even a true representation of the people. If the way the states do it, there's so many people left voiceless. So to me, when she says she doesn't want the white man's democracy, it's because this is not a democracy. It's set up in a way that the rural areas or the former would-be slave-owning areas would have outsized power, right? So we want to change the way our democracy is set up.
The challenging part is those two things go hand in hand.
Could a Cybertruck like the one that you see right behind me pay you $30 a year? I'll admit.
Go hand in hand. should this democracy fall, my people will fall first and suffer the most. Should something bad happen, it will be worse for us. So how we can meet in the middle. And the thing is, when we win, the country wins.
Yeah, that's right.
When we do well, the country does well. So, and I haven't figured that out. So this conversation is a bit premature for me because I haven't even been reading like I used to.
Yeah, clearly you haven't been reading at all. Because if you opened your eyes even a little bit, you would realize that the average black person in America is better off than the average black person in any African country or any European country. And
I wouldn't necessarily say that. There's a lot of good going on in Africa right now, and Europe is Europe. They're not much different than us, so black people have it fairly good in some places.
Let's not even touch on Asian countries where there is real racism against black people. It's like she's completely oblivious to the fact that the United States is the most
I wouldn't, like, saying that Asians have real racism against black people. I don't know that any Asians really had slaves like that of black people, and I live in Hawaii, so I know a lot of Asian people. This place is more than half Asian probably, so I've never had any problem with Asian people. I've never had anyone call me the N-word or nothing like that. But yeah, I wouldn't say Asian countries are more racist than the U.S. or the West. That's pretty insane, I think.
ethnic, racially diverse country that has ever existed in human history. We're so racist, right, that we elected a black man to be our president.
And right when that happened, a lot of white people just went crazy. That, like, they hated that. He ain't my president, and all the senators, Mitch McConnell and them saying they ain't gonna pass none of his stuff. That broke a lot of Americans' brains right there.
Times. The reason that trying to be a perpetual victim is not only dangerous, but frankly, really annoying, is because it doesn't ever allow a person to have a hopeful, positive, optimistic mindset about what they can achieve in their life.
And see, this is a lie. Just because somebody is aware of the past or aware of something happening now doesn't mean that they're a victim and think that they can't do anything. These people are pretty successful people on this podcast, right? They all got some money, they all doing well in capitalism, and they're, like I said, they're fairly successful. So them paying attention to the plight of other people, or even their own plights, doesn't mean that they're like whining or gave up on anything.
Constraining themselves. They're chaining themselves to failure. And it also completely goes against the American mindset of capitalism and competition and winning and being the best and meritocracy.
Well, capitalism is not a meritocracy. The U.S. is definitely not a meritocracy. If you're born in the right place, or to the right people, you get more than those born in the wrong place and to the wrong people. And as he said, like I told you before, capitalists want a competitive society, which when you compete against each other, somebody loses. And in our society, more often than not, more people lose than win, right? So there's few winners, more losers. I would like a more cooperative society. I don't want to be in a capitalist Western society that says, I got to compete with this guy over here, and we want the same thing, and we pretty much do the same thing, but one of us is going to do it better, so one of us has to lose, where we could just do it together, and both of us could be just fine.
Fail, or if you lose, you instantly declare it some injustice based on some immutable characteristic, such as your gender or your race or your sexual orientation. And it never allows you to grow or improve because you don't have to. You're already.
And that's not true. Like, even like everybody, all these right wingers love to bring up Thomas Sowell, right? He has a thing where he talks about equality or whatever, and he says that he had this teacher that was real mean to him, and that she was mean to all the students in the class, and that really pushed him to do better. So just because people are mean to you or you're not getting the same thing as everybody else doesn't mean you're going to quit. And he noticed it at the time, and he worked harder and tried to prove the teacher wrong, and now he's Thomas Sowell, this smart, amazing dude that all the right loves. But he knew that he was being treated poorly at one point. Like that, just because you realize your situation doesn't mean that you're going to let your situation win.
Already perfect. And if anybody tells you that you're not good enough for any reason, it's actually because they hate you and they're a bigot. That's why when Kamala Harris lost, they can't even begin to understand that she was just not a good candidate. They instantly go towards America just hates black women. Now, here they are talking about how having imagination and even having consideration for others is just a form of privilege.
It is not only a privilege to sort of imagine, but it is also a privilege to be able to think outside of yourself, to have considerations outside of yourself, and then next to yourself, your house and home.
But it's also
So
it's not.
that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying that it's a white privilege to have to be like not self-conscious but aware of other people. He was saying that it's a privilege to have the, what do you call it, the ability, like you make enough money that you're okay, your family's okay, and your house is all taken care of and everything's taken care of, and now you can think of other people. That's what he was saying. Like whatever he said before that got cut off, but he wasn't trying to say, oh, it's just to have consideration for others is white privilege. That's not what he was saying.
Imagination is absolutely a privilege. It was chilling when you said that, but it's also necessary. Like
It's a
there is
requirement
no
for movement.
way
Yes.
for us to be a
It's a
truly
requirement.
liberated people.
And so by imagination is a privilege, I don't really agree with that, because everyone has imagination, and when you don't have stuff like those poor kids, or if you don't have imagination, or if you don't have money, you go get a stick and a rock, right? You go find things and you make them toys. You use your imagination, right? So imagination isn't a privilege, it's something that everybody has.
Without imagination, we
requirement.
have to believe there is
Agreed.
another way. We have to.
Agreed.
There's a book called How to Get to Yes. We have to get to yes. And I know it is so hard when systemically you see over and over, we see over and over, there is no other way out. Our freedom, I was talking to my book editor yesterday, but our freedom is literally the way that we view freedom as Black people. When I say we, I'm talking about Black folks. We see it within the context of oppression. We don't see freedom outside of I just want to live. I just want to survive. I just want to be left alone. Even in the moments where our freedom has just been leaving us alone, that has been in the context of the trauma that is resulting from slavery and oppression and being a stolen people. So it's hard to talk
Slavery,
about
Jim Crow.
imagination when our existence has been shaped through the lens of trauma.
It's so hilarious when Black people like this think that for some reason, the slaves of the early Americas were the only people in world history to ever be oppressed.
She didn't say that. No one ever says that. So the right always does this. They just add extra words and put words into the mouths of liberals and the left. They just say stuff. No one ever said that Black people were the only slaves of all time. Who's ever said that?
To ever be enslaved, to ever go through hardship. I mean, she said, we can only think of freedom in the context of oppression. Well, yeah, freedom is in context to oppression. Why do you think so many Europeans came from Europe to the Americas? Because they were getting away from oppression. Whether it was religious oppression or the ability to have free speech.
They left Europe to avoid oppression, to come and oppress other people. That doesn't make much sense. I think they just left Europe to find more land and get more stuff. To expand the
leaving
West.
a tyrannical government, or escaping an unfair.
They wanted to leave a tyrannical government to make a tyrannical government, to kill all the Indians they could kill, and to make Black people build their stuff. Like, this makes no sense.
Justice system. And it's so funny how they talk about you have to have imagination, you have to be able to believe that there's a better way forward. Yet these are the biggest proponents of trying to keep Black people mentally enslaved and think that there is no hope, that there is no way forward.
They didn't
that
never
they're
say
oppressed,
that.
they can't accomplish anything.
No
They're
one ever said that.
disadvantaged. They're systemically oppressed.
Because you're disadvantaged doesn't mean that you can't do stuff. That, like, it's just silly. And it's not he's not even being genuine. He's being disingenuous, and he knows he is. He's just lying.
No chance. They are the one telling other Black people this and convincing them to have the similar mindset. It's like if you were running a marathon and each person running was of a different race. Black people are the only ones that as soon as the race starts, shoot themselves in both feet and then complain that they end up last.
Okay, so everyone's probably seen that meme. It's like we're running a marathon. So I'm sure everybody's seen this race here. Structural discrimination, the unequal opportunity race. So let's see if I can speed this up real quick. So Black people ain't shoot themselves in the feet. They were stopped, right? For a couple hundred years, started at 1492. all these things. They got to run laps. Got to pass on generational wealth, where ours got stolen from us, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. In case you're not watching, I'm trying to describe the race, right? And then let's see, it says 1964 they opened up so that the black people could start running the race. And then, you know, we got the laws against us. Pitfalls, redlining, underemployment, it says here. Standardized tests when we have poor schools, school to prison pipeline, things like that. But I mean, you all get the point. He's going to talk about we shoot ourselves in the foot at the beginning of the race. We didn't shoot ourselves in the foot at the beginning of the race. We got held back for the first, 400 years? So Brandon Lehman here, doing about the impossible, making Angela Rye look halfway sane or sensible. Here we go. He's going to be talking about The View next. Let's see if he can make these insane ladies sound a little bit more sensible, or if he's going to be back on his P's and Q's.
Crime is down.
But you're doing exactly my point here. What happens is each time people show statistics, everyone's saying crime is a problem. That doesn't make them feel better when you say, but it's not.
But they need a
Opportunity economy.
But again, that's a platitude. What does it mean?
The other thing that I will say is about AOC. She's been demonized as this too progressive, far left person.
AOC is definitely too left for the majority of the country.
No, she's not. AOC is barely left at all.
Only you can see me, and not only
AOC has moved pretty far right since she's got into office, and I think she was lying when she was running. I assume, like Miss Old Mama Bear over here. But let's see what he has to say about it.
Gets visibly irritated as her co-hosts keep correcting her nonsensical statements. I think Sunny is just on the show so everybody else can pick on her, and watch her face as she seems to start realizing that same fact herself. Watch Sunny make the claim that AOC and her policies are actually not far left, and Alyssa's like, huh? And drops a truth bomb on her. Watch.
What does the party have to do to reconnect with voters?
Go ahead. Why are you asking the Republican? I think the Dems should start. I've got thoughts, but I'll let you start.
I can start. Look, young people were still the age group with the highest support for the Democratic candidate this year. So we can start there. I don't think that young people have necessarily left the Democratic Party. Yes, there have been some gains made by the Republican Party, but by and large, young people are voting democratically. The other thing that I will say is about AOC, she has been demonized by the right, and she's been demonized as this too progressive, far left person. And I want to try to set the record straight, because if she is too progressive, then the Democrats really are going to lose the working class, because this is her platform. The key issues: healthcare for all people.
Yes.
Affordable housing.
Sounds good.
Rebuild the unions.
Okay.
Federal job guarantee.
Sounds okay.
Free public college.
Like it.
Create clean energy jobs.
Like
paid
that.
Parental leave.
Okay.
And expand protections for the LGBTQ plus community.
And defund the police, and open borders, and men can participate in women's sports.
So defund the police. I mean, I'd kind of be for that, but if you defund the police, you refund other things. Like you put funds into other type of community services. Open borders. Again, Trump was talking about making Canada and Mexico the 51st and 52nd state. I am for everybody in the world being together. We need to cooperate. We have one world. We have one planet. If China blows it up, then we suffer. If we blow it up, then Russia suffers. Anybody who messes up the planet's everybody else is gonna suffer.
And increasing taxes on every single person.
Oh, men in sports, I don't think men should be playing women's sports. I think we should make a league where trans people can play, but when we're young, I had girls on my football team up until high school, right? Up until through middle school, we had girls on the team, and there's girls that play high school football now. So I mean, I don't know, people cross over sometimes. Taxes should be up on everybody. They should be up more on the rich, and we get more stuff done when you pay taxes. When America was the most prosperous, the top tax rate was 93%.
Basically up to 90% to try to pay for all your free shit. But let's continue.
If that is too progressive for this country, then that's a problem for the Democrats, and that's a problem, quite frankly, for this country.
That used to be a description of a liberal.
But the devils are
Medicare,
also...
healthcare for all should be an everybody issue.
But the
okay?
devil's in the details, because a lot of this
It's not an everybody issue. It's a left-wing issue. The right wants you to work for your own. If you don't have enough money to pay for your own health care, you don't deserve it. That's just what it is.
does not support, for example, the Green New Deal, which would absolutely crush jobs across this country, wreak havoc
It would
on the
create
economy.
millions of jobs, actually.
It would actually make international travel virtually impossible to do because of some of the regulations that have been in place. From my perspective as a Republican who didn't support Trump, this may sound weird, I think Democrats focus too much on Trump. People who were going to be with Donald Trump were going to be with Donald Trump. There needed to be more of a, this is who we are, this is what we're proactively fighting for. And I can think of 3 or 4 policies that were laid out by the vice president. She talked about this support for elderly parents. She talked about these first-time home buyer payments. But they need a
opportunity economy.
But again, that's a platitude. What does it mean?
Opportunity economy.
You know, like, and I didn't know that by
a 90-page
But
white paper.
but in this world we live in, by like when you have 3 months especially, I don't know that people knew what she was for. And then a lot of her positions in 2020, she was on the complete opposite side of now. So
Did you hear that snarky?
She couldn't elaborate what she was for. Whenever she got asked questions, she would just start talking about her childhood and some lady that helped raise her and stuff. Like she was totally odd.
Comment she made, if that's too left for America, well then America has the problem. And that's the problem with Democrats that I've highlighted numerous times is...
Well, no, if that is too left for America, then America does have a problem. But we already do have a problem. You see all these homeless people. You see how people are going bankrupt due to healthcare. You see how people are shooting healthcare CEOs. Like, we do have a problem in America, and it's because our system is so far right that we just let people starve. Like, it's just what capitalism is. If you can't make it, if you can't compete, then you go by the wayside.
They talk at people. They don't talk to them.
And I think that Sonny and the Democrats and the liberals, they do talk at people. They shouldn't speak quite like they do.
And ask them what they want. They have an agenda that they expect the American people to get behind. And if they don't get behind it, they try to shame them, name call them, make them feel bad, say that they're evil people. And that was the playbook that the Democrats used, which got them absolutely whooped in this last election. And then I almost fell out of my chair laughing when Sonny was like, but she had her opportunity economy. And Alyssa's like, that isn't anything. It's just a platitude. What does that even mean? But now let's watch Sarah Haynes explain essentially what I just said, that Democrats keep telling people that their issues aren't real issues. And sure enough, Sonny proves her right on the spot. Watch.
With this pocket Wi-Fi, you can simply stay.
I think Rahm Emanuel hit it right on the head in an op-ed for the Washington Post. He had 2 parts that really kind of stuck with me. He talked about with inflation stinging, school absenteeism skyrocketing, students' academic scores plummeting, Democrats consume themselves in debates over pronouns, bathroom access, and renaming schools, and adopted terms such as care economy and Latinx to win over voters. And I think what it comes down to is oftentimes Democrats tend to tell people what to care about rather than listening to what they actually care about. Because he goes on to say, you know, they tiptoe around issues like crime, immigration, homelessness, and then they quote stats, while meanwhile there's an uptick in carjackings and you have to lock up deodorant in CVS.
Crime is down.
But you're doing exactly my point here. What happens is each time people show statistics, everyone's saying crime is a problem. That doesn't make them feel better when you say, but it's not.
Did you see Sonny's face? I mean, that is peak comedy right there. The elitist, pretentious attitude of the Democrats is turning off people, and they don't even understand it enough to try to tone it back for themselves. They can't help it. These people live and die by stats and polls and what the experts say, while regular people make their decisions based off of what is going on in their ordinary everyday life. Like, you can't...
So like he said, the elitist pretentiousness of Sonny Hostin, the Democrats and these liberals, right? Not being able to understand what's happening. Oh, crime is down. That's the same thing earlier in the earlier video that I did where Donald Trump had no idea how people could back Luigi Mangione. Like, why would they even like him? Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Because they're not in touch with reality. They don't know what real people think. They don't know how we live. They don't know how we feel, the stuff that we go through. But so I'm gonna leave it here, guys. This is, I'm sorry, what's his name again? Brandon Lehman. Go check him out. He has a pretty big channel. He does pretty good videos, high production value. He's a kind of far right, and he does videos mostly making fun of the left. And you know, I like to watch the right making fun of the left, or not the left, liberals. So he likes to make fun of liberals, but he calls them the left, like they all like to do. So until next time, guys, keep learning.